we do here is go back.
Good afternoon, everybody. That's better. How's everybody doing? Huh? I want to thank everybody for coming out. My name is Glenn Hunter, for those of you that don't know me. I grew up in Riverton so many years ago. I won't tell you how many. But first, before we get started, ladies and gentlemen, if you would indulge me, allowing us to have a moment of silence for those of us who are no longer with us in body, but in spirit. So if you would just indulge me in a moment of silence, I'd really appreciate that. Well, the first person I'd like to introduce is someone I've followed this gentleman's career for some time, even on WWRL back in the day when he was, spreading the word. And we still have a lot in common. I still think he teaches journalism. I still teach math. So, we're educators at heart. And what I was going to do is ask him to come up and say a few words, and then he's going to introduce the borough president. So, Errol, please come up.
Sure. Thank you, Glenn, and welcome to everybody. Glenn Hunter, I will tell you, is a very persistent man. I think he told me about this event maybe 8 or 9 months ago. And as he knows, when you ask somebody that far in advance, they can't say, well, I'm busy that weekend. He and I have had a dialogue over the months and years because he knows of my interest in politics. I am currently the political anchor at New York One News. And then before that, wrote a column in the Daily News. That column is now in New York Magazine. And those who have seen any of that, as well as those who heard me back in the WWRL days on the radio, politics is really my passion, and I have studied it for a long, long time, and like to write about it, like to talk about it, like to learn about it. So he and I had something to talk about from the minute we met. Just talking about the history of this illustrious place and the many people who used to live here. And I've talked about it with him and with Bruce Wright, and was at one of your earlier ones. I think it must have been the 70th, right? So it was 5 years ago, and that was a fascinating conversation as well. So I'm here really to learn and to watch and to participate. And I salute all of you, and I thank Glenn and others for keeping this history alive until some of us can write it down and spread the word to others as well. It is my pleasure now to introduce somebody who I've actually known for a long, long time, since before he even went into politics, in a different life, having nothing to do with journalism. I worked on economic development in Harlem and Brooklyn and all around the country. And one of the things that we did was to start and build credit unions, places for people to save their money and so forth. And was always interested in how we could apply it here in the city. I was especially interested because, I was actually born on the other side in the Manhattanville projects. And my father, who some of you might even have encountered at one point, was a police officer for a long, long time, working out of the 3-2, Edward Lewis. And so a lot of those streams all came together when I discovered that there was a group that wanted to start a credit union that would serve in part West Harlem, parts of the Upper West Side, and got to know a lot of people, including a young man named Mark Levine. And they built it, they ran it, they grew it, it worked. It was a pleasure to see him also branch out from that form of leadership and decide that he wanted to stand for election. And it's been a pretty quick ride ever since. Started a political club, ran for city council, got reelected, on and on and on. He is now the Manhattan Borough President, and this kind of grassroots work, which is where he and I both started, he knows, and we share this understanding, is fundamental to how the city works. Understanding it from the ground up is the only way to do public service. So I will let him greet you and tell you whatever else is on his mind. Mark Levine.
I've never been introduced by the great Errol Lewis before. You guys just made my day.
All right.
I am so thrilled to be here. Thank you, Glenn, for inviting me. I want to talk about the Riverton, but I just got to say that Errol really is an absolute treasure who has become just an essential voice for all things New York. Not just for we New Yorkers, but nationally. When there's a big story and CNN needs a smart analyst, they turn to Errol Lewis because he just has a visceral understanding of all that makes New York City politics work. So we've come a long way. We both had more hair back in the day. I'm catching up to you on that front. But I'm just so grateful for what you've done for journalism in New York. I hang on your every word, whether in New York Magazine or on New York One. So thank you, Errol. Hey Riverton, it's great to be with all of you today. I think I'm still new to some of you. I spent 8 years serving the city council, but on the other side of Uptown. I did represent West Harlem, a little bit of Washington Heights in the west side, but all west of St. Nick. And thanks to so many of you in this community, I'm now your new Manhattan Borough President. We got huge support here uptown. I would not have been elected if it wouldn't have been for the support here uptown. So thank you, thank you, thank you. But we're really here to talk about history and to talk about what the Riverton represents. You cannot tell the history, not just of Harlem, but of New York City, without the history of this one community. For 75 years, you have produced so many influential people in almost every aspect of life here, from the law to medicine to academia to politics. Of course, still home to my great friend Keith Wright, former assembly member and now county leader, one of the many shining stars to emerge out of this development. And it's so important that we keep that history alive, that we record it, that we archive it, and that we preserve it for the next generation so that this history is not lost. And Glenn, what you have done, I don't think anyone's done more to record the history, not just of the Riverton, but really of Harlem. Your archival work. Yes, please applaud for Glenn. And who else? Thank you so much, sir, for your help as well.
Thank you.
See, he's even archiving this event today. I mean, that's dedication. This is also part of the history. So I am just thrilled to be here to support you, to support this great effort to celebrate many of you who have made your lives here and have stayed connected. Thank you to everyone who has made this one of the most special housing communities in America, who's made so much history here. Let's keep that history alive. Thank you so much, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, the county leader of the Democratic Party of Manhattan.
Yes, sir.
Keith L.T. Wright.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank Glenn, I want to thank Kenny, and my roommate from college, Keith Hunter. Where's Keith? Is Keith here? There's Keith. We were roommates in college together. And well, most of you here probably don't live here anymore because you've made a lot of money, right? I still live in the same old rent-stabilized apartment that I grew up in. And we love every minute of it. And those of us that still live here know that everyone in this room, in this playground, is very jealous. But, you know, I want to thank Glenn and Kenny and Keith and the Harlem Archives for keeping our legacy alive. There's an old Herald Tribune article that still is in my house showing my mother bringing in pots and pans. Errol Lewis remembers the Herald Tribune, but not many people in this playground do. You remember Dukes? I actually live in Charles Dukes' apartment, where he grew up, right there on the main floor.
Coming back with my stuff.
And you're coming back. I know you are. I know you are. But this is, you know, this is a great occasion. Certainly, this was a neighborhood. People went to school here, they went to work here, they went to church here, and quite simply, it's still a neighborhood. And I want to thank the folks at the Tenant Association. I used to head the Tenant Association for many years, and the folks that still head it for keeping the legacy alive. So with that, I mean, it was a great place to grow up. Great place to go. My mother was the principal of that school right across the street for many years. And Glenn, you went there, didn't you? Yeah, you went. A lot of people went there. Yeah. I never went there. I spent a lot of time in the principal's office, though, I'll tell you that. So with that, listen, it's great. I'm glad Mark Levine, our borough president, can come out, certainly. And he's been a fantastic borough president representing all of our neighborhoods. But you got Dennis Skinner, George Hall. I mean, we were here, and these were our basketball courts. I was recounting with Dennis Leach how we used to play hot peas and butter. And Glenn, I remember getting you one time with that belt, right? Right, with that belt. So it was a great place to grow up. It's still a great place to live, and it's up to us to keep the legacy alive. Thank you. I ain't got nothing else to say. It's too hot. Thank you so much.
One of the things I did want to mention that we've received proclamations from several elected officials, Inez Dickens, Congressman Espaillat, as well as
Who?
An owl amongst us?
Anyway, there was one that I didn't get a chance to pick up from the mayor, so I'm gonna pick that up at some point later on. So, what we'd like to do is get started with the rest of the program when it comes to talking about the pillars. If you folks would take a look at those programs, I just want you to know that between Ken and Mark and Charles putting this program together, it was some work, and I think it's a quality piece of literature. I want you to thank those guys. First person I'd like to have come up is Judge Mark Whiten. Judge Mark grew up in Little Riverton, and he would like to talk about which of the pieces first. About Troop 163, okay? Some of you know about it. He's going to tell you a bit more. It's one of the 4 pillars that we built this. We think that we have, these pillars are what caused Riverton to be so great and helped us through life, et cetera, et cetera. I'll let him continue.
Hi there. Listen, when our dads returned from World War II, they were the primary apartments that they tried to rent that Riverton was seeking. And so a good percentage of them went to veterans who had just returned from World War II. Right. So our dads get here, along with our moms, and they want to build strong families. They start having kids prolifically, and they want something positive for them. So drawing upon, to a great extent, their military background, they felt like scouting was a really good place to start. Not only that could you learn how to march and all of that, but you could learn how to camp out, make a fire, have fun in the woods. You could also learn to be trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. And if you can live up, or attempt to live up to the 12 points of the Scout Law, then even if you don't always hit them all, you're going to be a pretty good person. So that's what they did. That's what they started. 1960, we have our first charter with the Scouts. They started working on it in '59, and we have our first charter for Troop 163. About 2 years later, Air Explorer Post 163 is established. My father was a Tuskegee Airman. We had a number of Tuskegee Airmen and flyers who were here. They were, most of them, still in the reserves. They had access to Stewart Air Force Base, so they used that as a platform to teach our older scouts about flying. So it was an amazing experience. I was a little younger, so I watched them all going off and couldn't wait until I got old enough to do it myself. I was a scout under Drew Kirkland, who's with us today, one of our former scoutmasters. Dudley Glass was one of our former scoutmasters, along with being the first black fire chief in the city of New York's history. He was also a Tuskegee Airman. Okay, all these people got together and started this. And then around the 25-year mark, something happened to our kids. They became gamers. They started staying upstairs, putting on calories, and playing with their games. The scout troop basically faded away and died after more than 25 years of being an integral part of the development of young people at Riverton. It was very sad. So when Riverton Square's new management took over and we pitched bringing the Scouts back to Riverton, they were very much on board. We were surprised at the way they embraced us and have been very supportive of us. And when we met for the first time over in the Senior Citizens Community Center, we didn't know if anyone would show up. But as it turns out, we now have 7 kids who are registered. We have about 6 or 8 adults who are registered. They didn't only come to the first meeting, but they came to the second, the third, the fourth, and they've been with us. We've got 3 kids in camp right now that we got them there at the last minute because our charters just came in. So I'm here to celebrate, and I hope you'll celebrate with me, the rebirth of Troop 163. It means a lot, and we have to demonstrate it in a firm and way that we can see. The Harlem Cultural Archives and the planners of this event have made a gift to the troop. So I'm going to ask, where's Glenn? Glenn is the treasurer. I'm the chairman of the committee, and this is Troop 163.
All right.
For those of you that don't know, you see the emblem, Harlem Cultural Archives. Well, it was at a reunion, I think it was the 60th, and Kenny and I were where the ping pong tables, in between the ping pong tables and the water fountain used to be. And we just saw everybody here, and we said, you know something? There's a lot of talent here and a lot of stories to tell. I said, let's make a movie. So we started a documentary. It's not quite finished, but we started saying that, hey, well, let's look to see if there's a historical society that can help us with our research. Come to find out there was none. So Keith and Kenny and I, we started one. And then, I'm not gonna go on and on, but on my welcome letter, you can see some of the accomplishments that we've had over the years, and we're very proud. We like to keep doing it. So, is his honor ready now? Because now he's going to come up and put on his veterans hat. He's going to talk about the World War II veterans and the impact they had on our lives.
Well, how many changes does Beyonce do? Come on. Just figured to have some. Come on. And while Darlene DeFore is taking pictures, I want you to know that she is a member of the Tri-State, the Claude B. Govan Tuskegee Airmen Group, which covers the Tri-State. And we do everything we can to preserve the history of these true American heroes. And it's been our honor to do that. Her father was at Tuskegee. My father also was at Tuskegee. And I am saying, Mrs. Skinner, your father was also at Tuskegee. So it's not a small thing. It's not our history. Without them, I don't think we'd be doing as well as we're doing. I don't think I would have been Judge Whiteman. Okay? Many of our Riverton dads served in the military during World War II, tested, challenged, and undervalued at first. These men excelled and persevered until their importance in the war effort could no longer be denied. The Tuskegee Airmen, for example, compiled a record of bravery and accomplishment, ultimately earning the Congressional Gold Medal. The Buffalo Soldiers were acclaimed for their extraordinary service as well, whether in the air, on land, or at sea. Our Riverton dads were represented and earned their membership in the greatest generation, credited with saving the world from the Axis powers and saving the world from fascism that was being espoused at the time. Each of our dads had historic service. Robert Wynn, I know his son. I've been with him on Facebook recently. He couldn't make it. His father landed on Omaha Beach on D-Day. Samuel Netter served as with General MacArthur in the Philippines. Major Neely survived the attack on Pearl Harbor while stationed on a minesweeper. And Dudley Glass, Joseph White and my dad, Wilfred DeFore, Dabney Montgomery, Mike Holloman, our wonderful doctor, Bascom Hodge, and Mrs. Skinner served as members of the famed Tuskegee Airmen. Each of our dads, all with compelling stories, fought the war on two fronts. First, against fascism in Europe and the Pacific, and the second for civil rights at home and against racism and inequality. When Dabney Montgomery came back, I don't know why this won't stay up here. When he came back, he took off his uniform and he marched in the March to Selma, along with Dr. Martin Luther King as one of his bodyguards. His tie and the heels of his shoes are now in the Smithsonian. These are our dads. These are the young men who returned from World War II. They moved into Riverton and raised families. These men and some women who also served became not only our parents, but our role models. They tended to treat all of the children of Riverton as their shared responsibility. Long before Hillary Clinton said, it takes a village, this was the village. They constituted a safe harbor and a village where we could live, learn, and mature. And we honor our World War II veterans today. We acknowledge their part in making us who we are here today. And if Riverton stands for anything after 75 years, it stands on the shoulders of those people who set standards that we all try to live up to every day. So thank you for helping us honor our World War II dads.
All right. One thing I am discovering, and this always happens when I talk with Glenn, is that all roads kind of lead through Riverton, which is partly why we're all here today. Courtney Bennett is the executive director of 100 Black Men of New York, who it turns out apparently has a Riverton connection. And like I said, I'm here to learn. So every time somebody explains one more connection, it's a little more education for the rest of us. So Mr. Bennett.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
So I grew up on 132nd Street outside the Riverton, and I went to Minnesink on 142nd Street outside the Riverton. So I'm a member of the Order of the Feather, went to Camp Minnesink, so died in the wool Harlemite. So it's good to see Keith and Mark and Errol and Glenn. Ken, thank you so much for all the work that you do. So David Dinkins was one of the founders of the 100 Black Men. And he founded the 100 Black Men in 1963. But Bob Mangum, who also lived here in the Riverton, called the first meeting. And the first meeting was called because a woman was driving up 135th Street. Her name was Hazel Sharper. She made an illegal U-turn, and some police officers arrested her. And as our sisters are wont to do, she gave them, a little bit of sass. So, they took her into the station for making a U-turn instead of giving her a ticket. So Bob Mangum, who grew up here in Riverton, said, you know what? I'm gonna go down there and I'm gonna avoid it, because he was the highest ranking black person in the police department at the time. And when he did that, 1963, everybody went after him. It was in the Post, it was in the news. This man went and voided the arrest, and we need to come after his job. The black men in the community at the time, the business leaders, the lawyers, the doctors, the kind of folks who grew up and lived here in Riverton, the veterans who came home, they rallied around Bob Mangum. And they said, you're not going to do this to him. And they saved his position. And moreover, they did not allow his character to be assassinated. So Bob thought, this was back in 1958, 59. He thought, you know what? We need an organization like this. So he reached out to men like David Dinkins, Charlie Rangel, Harry Belafonte, Sidney Poitier. There was so much going on in Harlem in the 50s and 60s. Harlem was really a new renaissance going on then, right? Not just the one in the 20s, but there was one burgeoning in the 60s. And he brought them all together, and they started meeting. And they started meeting here at his apartment. And then he grew that And then eventually they said, let's incorporate this organization and we will call it the 100 Men. And then this young lawyer by the name of Dinkins said, no, we're going to call ourselves the 100 Black Men. And ever since, we've had 100 black men, 100 black men in law enforcement, 100 black men, but it started with the ideas and the character and the values from a place like Riverton. And we have to think back that in 1963, to call yourself and your organization black meant what? FBI file, right? It wasn't the thing to do. Colored, Negro, whatever, but black meant militant. But these men who were doctors, lawyers, business owners, they had something to lose, but they wanted to stand up and show the people that they meant business. And they called themselves the 100 Black Men from that point forward. So there's a piece of history, Glenn is a member, and there's a history of the 100 tied here to Riverton. Just like there's a history of the 100 and Boy Scouts tied up to Menacing. I used to be the director of Menacing Townhouse for a bunch of years, and lots of kids from Riverton, of course, came through the townhouse in Menacing, but Camp Menacing, that's another story. But Glenn, I want to thank you. Congratulations on 75 years. This is the kind of legacy we've got to continue to pass on to our young people. So thank you very much for having me.
We actually have, I believe, one original Riverton mom. I don't know if there's another one, but I know that Brian Carr's mom is here. I'm going to ask her to come up.
It's really so nice to see everybody here, for those people who are here, some of the older ones, as well as new tenants or friends. And I certainly wish you all well. Just stay safe with all the things that are being thrown against us, and enjoy your afternoon. It's so good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give it up one more time for Mrs. Carr. Look, let me get this to the regular. Anyway.
I heard that.
Anyway, my name is Charles Duke. Although I still, at age 67, still have a hard time coming here on these grounds and referring to myself as Charles Duke. Many people knew me here as Doobie. So I see some head shake. Oh, that's who you are. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here, and my job right now, which I wasn't expecting to do, was to speak about role models. And in Riverton, we had role models aplenty. We were fortunate to be raised, mentored, had access to some great people, and a few of them name a little later. But at the same token, this was a great place to grow up. I was really am a child, though I was born in '55, I was really a child of the '60s. And at that particular point in time, we just had a fantastic time growing up here. And it's also great to see some of my old friends. I hadn't seen Danny Francis, and God knows, my Lord, he's my good brother, I tell you. Many people, Georgie Hall, Dennis, a couple of times. But anyway, right here you can tell I'm stalling for time. But anyway, as it goes right now, like I said, we probably the most important thing to us, and as I wrote here, they were accessible to us. These were not people who distanced themselves from us, from their fellow neighbors or the kids in the community. But quite the contrary, they were an integral part of the community's growing and maturing process. They were, as has been aforementioned, politicians, musicians, playground attendants, athletes, media personalities, community activists, teachers, security guards, maintenance men, bankers, among other noble professions. Now, time does not permit me to name everybody who was influential and had an influential role in our lives here. But I would be remiss if I didn't name a few, and a couple of them are named here. Clifford Alexander, who's the first manager of Riverton, Mildred and Clarence Puggy Bell, Constance and Bruce Wright, Cleo Gates, Cal Ramsey, Mayor David Dinkins, Dr. Billy Taylor, Phil Medley, Sammy Lowe, Constance Motley, Jimmy Fields, Dolly King, William Walker, Rosalind Palmer, Pat Edmiston, William Neal, Alma John, Rosetta Lenoir, and Melvin Dunn, as we know him as Bootsy. So just as it stands right now, we'd just like everybody to just give a nice warm round of applause to these people that I've just named. Because without them, many of us would not be here standing here today. And as I'll just close out by saying, we were blessed and our lives were enriched with access to all of these wonderful people. Thank you very much.
I'll move the microphone back. If that's okay with you.
Get your glove, let's play football.
Yeah. Anybody know what this stands for here? Has anyone been to 138th Street and 7th Avenue lately? What did you notice there that wasn't there a couple of months ago? It's a street corner called New York Wren's Court. And several of the Wrens lived in this development: Dolly King, Pop Gates, Huggy Bell. As you know, these guys taught the world how to play basketball the right way. They pick and roll, pick and pop, motion offense. They were, we just finished giving a panel discussion to a gentleman who wrote a book about the Black Fives. His name is Claude Johnson. It's called the Black Fives Foundation. I'm pretty sure you can see it online. But these guys, in addition to Cal and Bootsy, had one of the best tournaments in the city. And we have a couple of, and one MVP from one of the divisions here. At least he claims to have it. Nothing was written down. But Lenny, stand up for a minute, please. Yeah. Lenny claimed to have been MVP a couple of times for the internet. Anyway, not only, the only reason I bring it up is because not just were there excellence in things like business and politics, we had some pretty good ball players here too. A lot of good ball players came through here to get the good run. So if you want to know where some of the first original Wrens came from, they were from here, and they were some of the role models that we were fortunate to live with. I'm going to speak a little about the teachers. I just retired from teaching at the Board of Ed for like last 26 years. I still teach now, but there were quite a few teachers that lived in the Riverton, and I guess looking back, you couldn't appreciate how fortunate we were to have them as neighbors, because you had access to someone. Okay, well, if I'm not that good in this, you can go to so-and-so, she teaches this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just the fact that they were our neighbors and they had a vested interest in not just education, but the education of the kids who came here. And once again, it wasn't just the kids who lived in the building. A lot of people who hung out here didn't have residence here. And I just want to make that distinction, because there was quite a few of us that didn't have physical addresses in Riverton, but you wouldn't have known it because they were always here. And you know, we looked at them as family anyway. But my mother was a teacher. Keith Wright's mother was a teacher. And again, I'm not going to reiterate what's in the program, but you know, when you talk about education, it's something that, you know, it's been a phrase used a lot. You know, educating our kids, educate. We kind of looked to people who stressed excellence in education, and just the fact that we had so many neighbors who were role models, who actually, you know, walked the walk, and they showed us how to behave and how to become good learners. And like I said, I kind of knew I was going to go to college because all the guys older than me went to college, you know, and I know my brother can tell you the same thing. They didn't have to tell us, so we went away to school, you got accepted to this school, you know, oh, okay, well then, that's what we said we wanted to do, and we didn't have to have anyone tell us. So the role of the teachers is something that I can't say enough about, but I would just like to give them a round of applause if you don't mind. Technically, this is the end of the formal part of our program.